What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical, average American here today to react and learn about why the US Canada border is so weird. Because I don't know about you, but I've certainly never really thought about this before. Why is it shaped like this? If you take a look at this picture here of Canada and the United States, who came up with this? I mean, it's not the worst looking thing ever. It's just a little strange, that's all. If you look on the left side, it's a perfectly straight line. You could use this to like level a picture on the wall or something. It's the straightest line I've ever seen. And then all hell breaks loose. It's just like a squiggle down. Canada's kind of peeking into the US. That's Ontario. And then it goes up. And anyway, I'm sure there's actually a very logical, thought out reason for why this is the way it is. But I don't know that reason or the history behind this. So that's what I want to learn about today. Why is the US Canada border the way that it is? So let's take a look.
The United States-Canada border spans the entire North American continent, and because of this, it crosses a wide range of geography.
Yeah,
so before we do
true.
anything else, let's take a look at where the border goes.
Okay.
So, starting on the Atlantic coast between Maine and New Brunswick, the border first wanders north through thick forests and rugged highlands before circling back around to the south, where it follows the 45th parallel to the...
This is exactly what I'm talking about here. I think Maine is maybe the perfect example of where we are jutting up into Canada. Touching New Brunswick. We're touching ya with our Maine. We're touching... I don't know why I have to say it like that. We're touching ya with your Maine. And your Ontario is poking into us. And it's all very nice and all that, but it's some strange looking border shapes, if we're being honest, so.
Great Lakes. Here, it follows the water systems of Lakes Ontario, Erie, Huron, and Superior, with the iconic Niagara River and the Thousand Islands region acting as natural boundaries.
Ooh.
After the Great Lakes, the border follows the Pigeon River, separating Minnesota from Ontario before straddling about 100 different lakes, including the infamous Lake of the Woods, where the border juts north and then makes an abrupt U-turn back towards the 49th parallel. And
Yeah. I did a whole video about this place. This place here, in particular, where the U.S. like just goes up and into Canada and cause a whole bunch of craziness. And really, if you're looking at Minnesota, like zoomed in, it's kind of got some strange squiggly lines there. But and anyway, now we're about to reach the part where it's like a dead straight line of a border. Like, how did that happen?
And don't worry, we're going to cover this in a minute. The 49th parallel section of the border is largely defined by flat, expansive farmland, with subtle changes in elevation and the occasional interruption of rivers like the Red River of the North.
Oh, is this built perfectly along a parallel? Like on the globe? Like the, what parallel? What they say, 49th? Anyway, it's on a parallel, like, I didn't even know that, actually. Huh, is that why it's so straight?
Of course, though, as the border approaches the Rocky Mountains, the terrain becomes more dramatic, cutting through alpine forests and rugged peaks. Glacier National Park in Montana and Waterton Lakes National Park in Alberta straddle the border, creating one of the most beautiful areas along the entire border. Further west, the boundary winds through British Columbia and Washington State, traversing temperate rainforests, coastal mountain ranges, and the Columbia River Basin. It eventually reaches the Pacific Ocean near the Strait of Juan de Fuca, where the maritime border delineates territorial waters. But that's just the southern part of the border. To the north, Alaska's boundary with Canada arcs dramatically.
Alaska! That's right. Alaska, that's a thing. No offense to Alaska, but honestly, most Americans never go there, and some of us even forget about it. Good old Alaska.
dramatically northward. This segment follows natural features such as mountain ranges, rivers, and valleys, including the Yukon River and the towering St. Elias Mountains,
Wow.
home to some of the continent's highest peaks.
Cool.
Now that you know the border's path, let's dive into all of the weird bits and pieces of it.
Yeah. Yeah, here we go. It's far weirder than we know. Okay.
As already mentioned, the US-Canada border is 5,525 miles,
Jeez.
which already makes it the longest international border in the world.
That's cool.
To put that in perspective, the second longest border, the one between Russia and Kazakhstan, is significantly shorter at 4,254 miles.
Yeah.
That's an incredible length for a border, considering that any place where you can cross over has to be staffed by border agents from both countries.
Yeah, that's true. Jeez. That must, I never even think about that. Because, yeah, we have a border, and historically it's been very friendly, and but we still staff it with, like, border patrol and agents and security and whatnot. Look at Alaska, by the way. That's got, like, a super straight border line as well. Never even noticed that.
That said, though, and thankfully for both countries, the border remains undefended from a military standpoint, a
Right.
testament to the peaceful existence between the two countries.
Yeah.
Though there are
Yeah. This is very topical, very kind of current events, how peaceful our border and our countries have been. Isn't it? When was this video made? Wouldn't that be nice to just keep it that way? Yeah, okay. It's just funny that he says it in that way because of all the US-Canada tensions that have been going on, which is super, like, unfortunate. But anyway, back to the history here.
quirks. The first really weird part of this border is between Vermont and Quebec. Derby Line, Vermont is in a unique situation where the international border cuts through the town, and even through buildings.
I swear, I've done a few videos, like, about some of these specific border areas between Canada and the United States. A road that's split in half. This has a building that is split in half. There's, like, American towns that are in Canada for some reason. Why is our border so strange? Why is it gotta be so? It's kind of cool in a way. Like, it would be boring if it's just like, yeah, there's Canada and there's the United States, and instead it's like, this house is split in half, and in order for the inhabitants to go to their kitchen to get some Cocoa Puffs, they have to get out their passport and go through security.
The most famous example of this is the Haskell Free Library and Opera House, which was deliberately constructed astride the border in the early 1900s as a symbol of international friendship.
Wow.
Today, the library's front door is in the United States, while its bookshelves and reading room are in Canada. Visitors can cross the border simply by stepping from one room to another.
Is that, like, symbolic or something? Like, the entrance, the door is American, but the actual knowledge, the books, the reading room, that's in Canada. Is that, like, symbolic or something?
Although stricter post-9/11 border security has complicated this otherwise charming arrangement. The border also slices through private homes, meaning residents might eat breakfast in the US and sleep in Canada. You should note, though, that if you want to fully enter Canada proper, you'll still need to go through customs via the road down the street.
Wow.
Speaking of roads crossing borders, though, there's one road, also located in Vermont, that does cross the border into Canada for about 550 feet before dipping back into the United States.
Why?
Just outside the town of Richford is East Richford Road,
Why?
which crosses into Canada by about 100 feet. And unlike basically every other road that goes into Canada, you don't need to go through customs for this one, though you certainly won't be driving much farther into Canada either.
Whoa, wait. Couldn't you... So you can drive into Canada for 100 feet, no security checks. Couldn't you just, like, pull over and just run around and be like, I'm in Canada, and there's no record of it. I could do anything. And then it's like, hey, there's, like, a Mountie. Like, get out of here. It's funny this stuff even exists.
But those are just the small oddities. So let's get to the bigger stuff. A large portion
Okay.
of the US-Canada border famously follows the 49th parallel.
Is that famous? Is it famous? I didn't know. Is this well known? Oh boy. I feel a little embarrassed here. Is this famously known? I didn't. Okay, 49th parallel. And that's why it's super straight. All right. That who came up with this? Who? I'm just getting defensive now. I don't think this is that well known. It's like I bet everyone is taught this.
Stretching about 1,260 miles from Minnesota's Lake of the Woods to the Strait of Georgia in the Pacific Northwest.
Okay.
Often cited as one of the world's longest straight borders, it showcases the 19th century trend of using latitude lines as political boundaries. This boundary is so sharply defined that it literally slices through forests, creating a visible divide.
Oh, I've seen photos like this of how perfectly straight. I don't know who cuts down the trees and maintains this gap. The gap people who maintain this with their hedge clippers, but it's so dead straight because it follows the parallel because in the 1900s, that's how you did it. That's how you came up with borders. You just, along the parallel, that's how we're going to do it. That it's just as simple as that. There's no like crazy explanation.
But the story gets even more intriguing.
Oh.
The 49th parallel doesn't continue straight to Lake Superior
Yes.
as one might expect.
Yeah.
Instead, the border dips south along the Pigeon River.
Look at that. Look at that. If it did continue straight, America, we would just own Lake Superior. We would just have it all. We just have all the water. That's our water. That's what we'd be saying. Instead, we kind of share it. So, how'd this happen?
A quirk rooted in the 1783 Treaty of Paris, which ended the American Revolutionary War. The treaty
Okay.
relied on outdated maps and vague descriptions, leading to later corrections when surveys revealed the actual geography of the region.
Huh.
Similarly, the 49th parallel bypasses Vancouver Island entirely, leaving the island entirely within Canadian territory.
That makes
this
sense.
arrangement was the result of the Oregon Treaty of 1846, which resolved a boundary dispute between British and American settlers in the Northwest.
This makes sense. Like that. I mean, we do weird things on the border. So splitting an island in half is not the strangest thing we could have done, but Vancouver Island's just Canadian. Okay, that makes sense.
While the U.S. secured rights to land south of the 49th parallel, the British insisted on retaining Vancouver Island, a strategic and economically valuable region at the time. The
Okay.
treaty's language was ambiguous enough to lead to further disputes, however, including the infamous Pig War of 1859 that would ultimately lead to the San Juan Islands becoming part of the United States.
Pig
Moving
War.
back east, the border through Maine is another oddity.
Yeah.
Unlike the straight-line simplicity of the 49th and 45th parallels that define much of the border, Maine's boundary with Canada is a twisting, jagged line that owes its shape to the Aroostook War, a boundary
The Aroostook War. I don't live anywhere near Maine, so I've never really taken a good look at it. It's really interesting to me that for a lot of Americans living really far north, like Maine, we're really cohabitating with Canadians. Like, this part of Maine in particular, like, goes so far up into Canada, it's side by side with New Brunswick. It's not like up and down. It's left and right, side by side. That's really interesting. I wonder how that affects like the Maine, New Brunswick culture there. If the Americans there are like have Canadian influence, or the Canadians have the Maine influence, or yeah, it's interesting that we're kind of jutting up like this.
a twisting, jagged line in the 1830s and 1840s. Once again, the Treaty of Paris had vaguely defined the border between Maine and New Brunswick, leading to conflicting claims over the area. The Webster-Ashburton Treaty of 1842 eventually settled the issue, but only after protracted negotiations and near-armed conflict.
So basically, for a lot of this stuff, when wars ended, they roughed out who gets what. Very rough. Then later they went in and were like, this needs to be much more specific. And after some tensions or negotiations, it was all kind of just sorted out.
The resulting border follows rivers and mountain ridges, which explains its irregular shape. But the question remains, why didn't they simply extend the 45th parallel, which forms much of the border between Vermont and Quebec, eastward to the Bay of Fundy?
Yeah.
Who can say? Beyond these larger...
Who can say? Who can say? I thought you were going to say. No, all right. It just is because it is.
Quirks, the border's micro-anomalies are even more intriguing. Let's first head to the northwest angle of Minnesota, a small piece of land north of the 49th parallel that is cut off from the rest of the United States.
Yeah.
This border oddity is the result of yet another treaty mishap. The Treaty of Paris that defined the northwest boundary of the US as running through the northwest angle of the Lake of the Woods was based on faulty maps of the region at the time.
So much, I feel like so much stuff, important stuff in history was literally decided because somebody made an error on a map or on a whim was like, well, our land should at least go up to that lake over there. And everyone's like, all right. Like, it's just as simple as that. That's just how it worked.
When the true geography of the lake was uncovered, it left this isolated pocket of U.S. territory accessible only by boat or by crossing through Canada.
Wow.
Today, about 100 people live in the area. Further west lies Point Roberts, Washington, a tiny U.S. exclave south of Vancouver. This community exists because the 49th parallel slices through the southern tip of the Tsawwassen Peninsula.
Who the heck is living here? What is this? What is this thing? Point Roberts? I don't even know about this. It's like a little peninsula coming off Canada, Vancouver. This little tiny thing. Why is that American? Why? That should obviously be Canadian. How? How do you have to cross the border twice, go into Canada. If you leave the US, go north, cross into Canada, go around a U shape, cross the border again, enter the United States. What do they have there? What's there? What's there? Like the best Walmart? What's there? What's so great?
As a result, Point Roberts is cut off from the rest of the United States and is accessible by land only through Canada. Residents must cross the border multiple times a day for work, school, and other necessities. The closeness of Point Roberts to the major city of Vancouver, British Columbia has led to some odd demographic traits, such as people living in the US-owned Point Roberts and working in Vancouver in order to satisfy specific visa requirements.
What? This is bizarre. I'm surprised this is actually a thing. Cool that you get to live so close to Vancouver. That's probably cool. But who is doing this? Who are these Americans holding out?
Similar to Point Roberts, in Quebec, the Akwesasne Mohawk territory straddles the US-Canada border, extending into both Quebec and New York. The Akwesasne people have lived in this region for centuries, long before international borders were drawn. But today, the community has to navigate a patchwork of jurisdictions across both countries, with residents regularly crossing international boundaries to access schools, healthcare, and other services. This has led to there being two Akwesasne towns, one on the small peninsula jutting into Quebec, and the other firmly rooted in New York State.
Interesting.
Despite this international boundary separation, the Akwesasne people consider themselves a single community.
Wow.
Then there's Hyder, Alaska, a remote town that can only be accessed by land from Canada. Surrounded by mountains and forests, Hyder is geographically isolated from the rest of Alaska.
Like, this isn't even a one-off thing. It's like multiple times along our border, we have these weird communities. I don't know. Like, I guess I shouldn't bash it. Like, if you've been living in this specific part of Alaska, your great grandparents lived there and you got a cabin. Like, who am I to tell you you're weird for staying and living there? Like, good for you. More power to you, I guess.
and its residents rely heavily on the nearby Canadian town of Stewart, British Columbia for services. In fact, Hyder is so dependent on their Canadian neighbors that the town primarily pays for things using Canadian currency.
Wow.
Residents also use the British Columbia 250 area code rather than Alaska's 907. They manually change their clocks to British Columbia's Pacific time zone rather than the Alaska time zone, and they even celebrate Canada Day.
Just make it Canadian. For God's sake. Just make it part of Canada. Stop messing around. What is this little tap dance, this little game we're playing? Oh, you're part of the United States, but you do literally everything Canadian. But you're not. It's just like, what? it's funny. But it's kind of cool this weird stuff exists, but just make it Canadian. It basically is.
The border here is mostly a technicality, with a level of integration that blurs the line between the two countries.
Yeah.
Back east, a similar but opposite situation exists on the island of Campobello in New Brunswick.
Oh.
Although the island is part of Canada, its only road connection is to the U.S. state of Maine via the Franklin Delano Roosevelt Bridge. As such,
wow.
Campobello residents must cross the border for most of their shopping, healthcare, and other needs despite living in Canada.
Seriously, if you live in these weird places, good luck getting your Amazon packages. How are you even going to get your toothpaste on time if the Amazon guy has to cross the border 7 times? These people are living in hell by not being able to get their packages, I bet.
This reliance on the U.S. has created consistent requests from the island's residents for a bridge that directly connects to Canada, as ferry service is inconsistent through the spring, summer, and fall, and far too dangerous during winter.
I see.
There's so many more little weird spots on the U.S.-Canada border, but I had to draw the line at my very favorite oddities. If this video got you super...
Oh, is that it? There's more? Holy cow, he couldn't even fit it all. Jeez. This was great. This is by Geography by Geoff. Yes, that's the name of his channel. He has a lot of fascinating stuff about Canada and geography, and so kudos to him for making this great informative video. I didn't know there was so much weirdness around the US-Canada border. It's weirdly shaped, and there's even more weirdness when you zoom in on certain parts, but I think being weird is kind of great. Makes life kind of interesting. And yeah, it made this story super interesting. So I think I get it. I get it now, why the border is so strange. And it's kind of a cool, unique thing about the relationship between Canada and America. So I like that. Anyway, if you liked this as well, feel free to give this video a like or leave a comment with your thoughts on the US-Canada border and any of these strange things. That'd be fun to hear about. And if you're interested in more videos like this, me reacting to Canada and learning about Canadian culture and seeing Canadian things I've never seen, feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching and see you next time.